Okay, hello everybody. This is Soviet Russian Bear, and right now I have Joaquin Flores with me. He's back on my channel. So, how are you, Joaquin? How
Hey,
are
I'm
you?
doing good, man. Thanks for having me
Good,
back.
great.
Always good to
Yeah,
see you.
great. Yeah, great. Okay, so the subject of today's video is the Great Reset because of the certain disease, should I say?
Yes, we can say that.
Yeah, we can say that. And I actually made a video on my channel about this guy, like World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. He wrote the book Great Reset. So from my video, I have concluded that we are actually dealing and with an open. They are not even they are not even hiding their plans. They are like, if I made this video like, let's say, 5 years ago, people would people would talk to me like a conspiracy, some sort of nutcase. But you can actually purchase the book and read it for yourself. They are not even hiding their plans anymore.
Yeah, they're not. But I think that the plans will not go as smoothly as they had hoped. There's a very strong air of desperation about this, and as I just showed you the books, I've been digesting them, and I'm familiar with the ideas of the fourth industrial revolution and Great Reset, um, without misleading, your audience. It requires a very strong understanding of some Marxist ideas in order to understand like stages of history and stuff like that. But if you're interested like in cheap thrills or caricatures, like you're in the wrong place. But it's a very complicated thing. From a sociological, perspective, you have to really understand the Great Reset politics, and it's not necessarily what people think when they think of Marxism or but you have to approach it from a sociological, perspective. But I think
Mhm.
it's failing is my point, because um, there's an air of desperation and a hurriedness. They're like in a hurry to do
Yeah.
this. And I think that it's, in terms of the things that they would need to accomplish first in order for this to work, it's premature. They needed certain events to line up a certain way in order for this to succeed the way that it's supposed to succeed. So actually, like the wars in Syria and Ukraine and all of these actually are part of this. These are not like disconnected phenomena. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
So
does.
like, because they failed in Syria and Ukraine, they were supposed to have these things resolved a certain way in order for this great reset to happen the way they needed it to happen. So now we have this, but people are going to move to Russia, I think.
Oh, could be. Listen, speaking of Marxist terms, I mentioned the term Asiatic mode of production. You
Yeah,
know, when it's a classical Oriental despotism, like
that's right.
it is a slave owning systems, but it's a system, but it's not, but it's not centered around like individuals like slave owners.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, the state, the collective, I mean, the narrow group of the elite close to the despot, they are the collective slave owner. So is the Great Reset, as it was planned, essentially a Oriental despotism 2.0, like reborn in modern with.
Yeah, it's very similar. You're talking about
Mhm.
the ideas of Karl Wittfogel, the Marxist theoretician who introduced
Yeah,
these ideas about the Asiatic, or
mode of
Asiatic
production.
mode of production. And primarily
Yeah,
this was based on ideas of controlling access to waterways, in hydraulically driven societies. So when you look at the difference between the Mesopotamian civilization, or between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers,
yeah,
and how despots were able to control access to water, which then controlled, you had to pay taxes to get access to water uh, for your crops. This is
yeah,
very different from areas that are heavily forested, like in parts of Iran or in parts of Germany, or in Europe or in Russia that are heavily forested, because you have rainfall.
Yeah.
So the thing is that they can't control the rainfall back then,
Oh,
right?
absolutely, they
Right. So
can.
this whole thing about controlling health and controlling weather, right, is
Yeah.
a 2.0, like you said, Asiatic. It's a horrible term because there's nothing wrong with Asians and stuff, but basically a despotic mode of production. So
Production. Yeah.
if you think about the capitalist mode of production is based in finance capital, like banking,
Yeah.
which is based on, and this might hurt the fucking feelings, excuse my French, of libertarians who don't think that banking and capitalism is like related somehow. I haven't heard this argument really explained very well, you see, but in some fucking people's minds, capitalism good, banks bad. I don't, whatever, dude. But in terms of a language that if you were to travel to other places outside of Pennsylvania or Texas around the world and have an intelligent conversation with people about finance, the word that comes after finance is capital, because what you're financing, what you're using to finance is capital. So usually people put that ism after the word capital to explain the financial banking system is called capitalism. It doesn't mean you have a right as an entrepreneur to have like a small business. Or you see, people think about capitalism and small business, and then they think that large businesses is communism, which is a mind fuck, because even though I know what they mean by that, they mean that the businesses are being dictatorial. I know what they mean by that. But in terms of understanding where you live and why what's happening in your world is happening, you're going to be, ass upside down fucking backwards, not knowing what words, to describe the world that you live in. So, but if you just say finance capitalism requires that the money that's lent, is going to be paid back like with interest. So in order for that money to be paid back with interest means that the thing that was invested in is turning a profit, right? But things in the future no longer can turn profit
Oh, yeah.
as they're automated, like as you have, computers and stuff, like, and robots, right? So the fourth industrial revolution is about transforming the financial banking oligarchy, which is a plutocratic type of,
Yeah.
plutocrats. So the oligarchy wants to transform from being a plutocracy into being a despotic control over access to basic resources of life, which technology otherwise would have liberated. So they're actually trying to slow down, like in Orwell's 1984, they're trying
Yeah.
to slow down the actual release to the public of real technologies. And then they're trying to increase the coercive and medical problems technologies to control access to weather, changing what's in the sky to lower the amount of sun that, farmers can have access to. So crops are smaller. So you need GMOs. So
Oh,
dude,
yeah.
what you've nailed it. This is exactly a despotism 2.0, and it's going to be worse than capitalism, and there's going to be none of the freedoms that people associated with, democracy
Capitalism.
and capitalism together
Yeah. Yeah.
somehow, in people's minds.
Yeah. Okay. So, but speaking of capitalism, in my video about the Great Reset, I mentioned that the capitalism will transform into, or I mean, it transformed from a shareholder capitalism into a stakeholder capitalism, and that the corporations will no longer, and according to their plans, of course, the corporations will no longer be transnational, because the very institute of nationhood and the state is going to be obsolete according to them. It's according to them, not according to me.
Right.
Yeah. So the transnational corporations should be called global corporations. So could
Right.
you please tell me more in detail about the stakeholder capitalism?
Well, what they mean is that,
Mhm.
a shareholder is ownership.
Yeah,
A
ownership.
stakeholder is a shared responsibility for outcomes. A shareholder may have shared responsibility for outcomes, but they also have shared gains and shared benefits. So a stakeholder has only things to lose. A shareholder has things to gain or to lose.
Yeah.
So in other words, they want to shift all the responsibility for society onto people. While they have the power, they want to blame what people do for the reason that they have power. It's a typical like abusive relationship. Like, I'm in charge because you're an idiot. So let me do more things to make you an idiot to prove, and we'll build a culture on the idea that you are an idiot. And that's the reason that I'm in charge. That's stakeholder capitalism. But in fact, it's not capitalism. It's corporations, which are entities, but corporations can be nonprofit. It's a vehicle of power. The idea that money is the goal is an erroneous idea. The point is power. And under capitalism, money is a good vehicle to power, but the point is power, not money. The point is power, not money. So there in feudal societies, before capitalism, again, the point was power. Land was, feudal holdings like land, and the feudal, was a vehicle towards power, and the feudal relationships like the chivalric code and the relationships between, peasant and lord and baron and king and so forth and back and forth were just how that was held together, right? So yeah, they don't but it's premature. The technologies that they're trying to hold back, they're trying to use words to confuse people, because there's a fourth industrial revolution, which is a good thing generally. I mean, if you're optimistic enough about I'm not, but if you're optimistic enough about technologies and stuff, like there is a way that it can be good. I mean, or neutral, or improve people's lives in the way that they think that lives are improved by having more gadgets and more things. I mean, there's a way that it can improve people's lives different from what Klaus Schwab and these people are proposing, Yuri. There's a fundamental contradiction in what they're saying. In other words, look, they're saying that AI and this fourth industrial revolution, 3D printing, Internet of Things, somehow requires that we all have less. And that's not how technology works. Technology progresses and everybody has more. So, but there's certain technologies that you do end up with less. And those are if coercive technologies are researched and implemented ahead of the curve of productive, technologies. Does that make sense? So that's what they're trying to focus on, is slow down technology in all spheres of life that classical liberalism associates with quality of life improvements. I'm a critic of modernity. Don't look at me. I'm just saying what the argument goes, right? But in fact, if you look at what they're proposing, is to lower the standard of living by the criteria of modernity, but not introduce the freedoms that people had prior to modernity. So you don't get the pre-modernity freedoms. You have a post-modernity sort of slavery. The idea of lockdowns, of being locked down, your stay-at-home orders, prison. This is language from prison, by the way. That's where the term exists from, a lockdown in prison. Okay. So the idea of adjusting and getting a population used to being locked down is what this is all about. It's not about something else. Okay. Then if you read the articles that they produce from this think tank, the World Economic Forum, okay, it's like a forum, like a think tank. They have articles. You're gonna own nothing.
Yeah.
You're going to be, and then if you read, these books and understand what they see as an opportunity and and if you also just look at the policies, and if you put one and one together, like if you look at the policies happening in the UK and the US, and then you look at these books and you look at their economic agenda and the things that they're proposing, they're saying that you'll own nothing. Well, yeah, of course you'll own nothing because you can't work, right? You're going to you're going to be on lockdown if you put one and one together. And then what they say in the texts is that drones will fly to your apartment window and deliver you items that you rent or that you borrow.
Yeah.
It's like they call it rental, but what you're exchanging for the possibility, to have access temporarily to this item, as if it's like the idea how everyone has Netflix and stuff like that, instead of owning like people used to own the VHS tape. Now they go on Amazon and then they spend the full money that you could own the movie for to have it for 48 hours. So, but it's all digital. So why wouldn't they just let you keep it? If it's a digital, I mean, it doesn't, right? I'm telling you. But they're moving on from this. Now they're moving it to be that your social credit will be your entire credit. That your social credit is going to replace money. And social credit is built upon following orders. So as long as you remain orderly, then you'll get social credit, and then you'll be able to have some things that you rent that will be delivered to you in a drone. So there have to be droneable objects. So you're not talking about furniture. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're really a prisoner. If you understand how prisons work and how people get things and packages are sent to them, this is a very, very ugly vision of the future. If countries that have a powerful enough military and an army, and a territory can oppose this, I can see a country like Russia being a lot like how the United States was, and in the middle of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, when immigrants poured in to a country that was freer, that had opportunities. At a time when old Europe was so stuck in its class system and its inequities, its inequalities, and its lack of justice and opportunities, that people came to the United States from Europe. Now I can see people from the United States going to Russia or Belarus, countries that stay out of this great reset. I can see that happening. There's tons of territory. I've been looking at like land in Kazakhstan, in southern Siberia.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, like endless green mountains.
Yeah.
It looks like Slovenia, which is but Slovenia is small, but it's like giant. It's like you could build like a dacha, and you could just have some like power if you need. And I'm telling you, people, I'm telling you, people are going to start to think. There's like tons of land. It's like cheap, and it's purchasable. You can, buy a few acres and, a few hectares. That's all you need.
Yeah. And you see, I don't mind like smart, free-thinking people moving to Russia, and especially to Siberia and South Siberia. That's okay. But also, I would like to ask you another question about the Great Reset. Is that people are, people are sometimes get like duped by terms like equality and climate change, save the planet, and blah, blah, blah. And in the comment section of my Great Reset video, there was a guy who said, or maybe it was a girl, I don't know, the guy who said that actually vegetarianism is very good for your health, and the blah, 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 that you should completely give up on meat. Like, I don't have anything against vegetarianism or even veganism, as long as they don't try to show their ideology down my throat. I've eaten meat for all of my life, and I will continue to eat meat. So yeah, don't bother trying to convince me not to drop eating meat. However, so I think that the ideologists of the Great Reset, they will try to use like save the planet, the climate change, and blah blah blah. So they are I see a lot of demagoguery in what they are saying.
Oh yeah.
So what can you say about their out of their demagoguery, and how many people are going to be duped into the into this new
A
brave
lot
new
of people
world.
are going to be duped. It's they've been changing the hormonal profile of the population for a while, so that you have like big problems like ones that Carl Jung would describe in terms of animus possession, anima possession, gender dysphoria related stuff, but it's not gender dysphoria. In fact, it's just anima and animus possession in like Jungian psychoanalysis, and it's you can see it like everywhere, and the men are afraid, and
Yeah.
there's just bad images, there's bad role models of male behavior, and those bad role models of male behavior, I mean, I'm calling them bad. These role models of male behavior are the shoe in for the altered, like chemically altered hormonal profile. Men have lower testosterone, lower sperm count. So they don't
Yeah.
have like that, that thrusting desire to take on life. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so they're not pushing their way into things, and they're a little bit soft and flaccid in their approach to all things,
Yeah.
and they're acquiescent, and they are passive aggressive, and to the extent that more than half of them, or half of them, are still heterosexual, they have been trained about how to relate to women, to be, and in ways that are short-term gratifying to women, but mid to long-term very frustrating for women, who then
Yeah.
have some fantasy of a actual man. So then that discrepancy in the relationship leads to further frustrations and problems in the relationship, which leads to
Yeah. And
divorce.
this, yeah,
and
and the
and he
thing
thinks
is
he's
that
done everything, that he's very confused about the divorce, because I said, because I did everything she wanted me to do, and it's like, you idiot, like that's how
yeah,
you not be happy in a marriage. If you do everything she wants you to do, then
you're a slave.
you're a slave, and that's not known.
Absolutely.
It's not attractive to women. It's a role reversal, and
Yeah.
it's you can at any rate, you can look at it from this angle, and why, I mean, answering to your question, like how many people will, a lot of people are going to buy into this, dude. It's a big
Yeah.
fucking problem. A lot of people are going to buy into it. So,
Yeah.
um, but you can look at the social engineering for a long time. They tried to change the meaning of words. They changed the meaning of fourth industrial revolution. Like, this was like from the Hanover World's Fair in 2011. This is not a Klaus Schwab idea. And these are people have been
Mhm.
talking about things like this for a long time, but they never thought about it as being a mechanism for human enslavement. They always thought about it in terms of what would happen if you had 3D printer in your home,
Yeah.
right? So if they would stop pretending that electricity was expensive, they're pretending that I'm not talking about the source. I'm just saying they're pretending that electricity is expensive. Like, producing electricity from gas is cheap. Producing
Yeah.
electricity from nuclear power is
It's
cheap.
cheap. Yeah.
Okay. It should basically be almost free. I mean, it should be a negligible cost, like a water bill.
And speaking of nuclear power, I'm sorry,
What is
Joaquin,
that?
but what I said, speaking of nuclear power, just look at they produced a TV series called Chernobyl.
Right.
They absolutely they adore to spin that they adore the Chernobyl theme. They are demonizing nuclear power generation, and
Mm-hmm.
the only thing they use is Chernobyl. They try to scare people from nuclear power to get countries like France. Well, Germany has already closed all of their nuclear power plants, I believe. But they try to get France to close all of their, and US to. They basically demonize nuclear power generation in the eyes of all humanity, and they use Chernobyl for this, man.
Yes.
although it is debatable that Chernobyl was actually a diversion.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, look, I think that you can have these companies involved in making nuclear power plants, and I can see them cutting corners. I can see them building in ways that like can produce a problem for sure, like a meltdown. Like these things happen. They shouldn't happen. I don't mean to normalize like, oh, these things
Yeah,
happen, but I mean, these things happen. I think they're preventable is what I mean, not these things
yeah,
happen. But they have next generation of nuclear power, which is not nuclear power is actually just boiling water. And then you have
yeah.
like steam. It's steam power. People actually, it's so funny about nuclear power is that it's like it's steamboat technology, but you're just using like the nuclear process to get to water to boil. And then you're using the energy of boiled water. So that's very interesting.
Yeah,
It's not like the nuclear it's not like the nuclear is the powers that, you know what I mean? It's very misleading.
yeah,
They're just giant water boilers. So, boiling
yeah,
water is a good way to get power if the energy that goes into boiling the water is less than the energy that comes out from the water being boiled.
mhm,
And, previously it worked the other way around. Like you would put more energy into boiling water than the energy you would get out of the boiled water, right? Okay. So it's very interesting, but they
yeah,
can do these things, but they don't want to, uh, it works like you have a paradigm of, look, the Western world, the banking establishment are run by occultists and they're bent on power. Their minds are warped. They're mentally ill people. They're antisocial.
psychopath.
Psychopaths and stuff. And you can debate whether being in that position fucked up their mentality or people with fucked up mentalities are drawn to those
Hmm.
positions. It's a little bit of a chicken or the egg sort of debate. It really doesn't
Yeah,
matter at
yeah,
this point, because we're not suggesting to replace them. The possibility that we have today in front of us is a decentralized model of economic reality and social reality. And they're trying to focus
hmm,
on centralization in this sort of despotic model that so eloquently referred to as 2.0. So yeah,
yeah,
but like I said, they required some things to happen before this could succeed, but they're doing it anyway. They're doing it anyway. And when you look at all of their plans, Yuri, because you studied the events in Syria and Ukraine, and you could
yeah,
see how
yeah,
the events were tied. But even though some big push would fail in Syria, they would still try to do the push in Ukraine. So, and you could see that or
yeah,
even though they didn't succeed in destroying Syria, they still tried to do the refugee crisis in Europe. Even though the
yeah,
logic of that crisis was supposed to be that the situation never ended in Syria and that it continued to produce this black hole of chaos and more refugees into Europe. They knew that they couldn't succeed in this refugee plan either, but they went ahead with the plan because that was part of the plan. It can be hard for people to understand why they try to go through with plans when the other contingent parts of that plan are failing. That's hard for people to understand. I think it's easy to understand, but a lot of people don't understand it.
okay. So if we talk about nuclear power plant, then the nuclear power generation, they propose to replace it with so-called green energy. But man, I've seen what happened in Texas this winter. I see what happened in those United
Yeah, it's
States
not
with those
reliable.
states with
Yeah.
it's absolutely not reliable. And you see it has failed. The green energy has failed them. So is this um, is this great reset plan? But anyway, is this great reset plan we're talking about connected with the Green New Deal?
Yeah, absolutely. Green New Deal is part of this Agenda 2030. They're just using the illness to get to Agenda 2030 is the Great Reset. It's one and the same
Mhm.
thing. 2030, Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 is the Great Reset. Those are the same things. So whenever they talk about, this is not a conspiracy theory, for fuck's sake, people. Whenever they talk about these things openly, they say, oh, the Green New Deal is great because it gets us further to our, UN Agenda 2030 goals. This is, people hear these numbers and it sounds kind of like sci-fi and shit like that. And
Yeah.
people don't know that if they just open the fucking New York Times or any report about what was said at the UN or what a normal politician says when they talk, these are terms that they are using. We're not like crazy people. I think there's some disconnect going on because people, for good reasons, have completely turned off mainstream news, which is good. That's good.
Yeah.
But
Great.
then they're like only getting alternative information sources, and they don't know that the term New World Order is a term that they use. They don't know that the terms Agenda 2030 are terms that they use. They don't know that the Great Reset is the name of a book that they wrote. They think that we're talking about these things as like as phantasmic mental illness conspiracy theories. See, this was written by Klaus Schwab. See, it says C19, The Great Reset. That's a book. It's not, this is the guy who leads the World Economic Forum. That's the think tank of the IMF. That's the, okay, this is Davos, people, okay? So people need to understand what's happening. Like, can you imagine if like Hitler was rising to power and he's talking about things and people thought it was a conspiracy theory because they turned off the news, right? I mean, I can understand. I mean, I would say, yeah, turn off the news. But like this stuff is happening. Like this is a Holocaust in the making right now that we're having right now. Like there's going to be people fleeing from Western. They already are. Every day people ask me, where can I, where should I move? And I can't really say, I can't really. What's that?
Suggest them to propose to move to Serbia, maybe Serbia.
I don't want people moving here. They'll fucking ruin it. You know what I mean? But but they should move to Russia, and no, Serbia is just too small. I'm proposing like the vast uninhabited expanses of like Central and Southern Siberia or Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, like the stands, former Soviet Central Asia, like in the forested region, not the desert plains, but the forested regions and the mountains, with the beautiful, crystalline water streams and the gorgeous, like forested, like people don't even know what the world looks like. I swear, it's crazy. So, I think that Russia is playing this very well personally right now. They have to be very careful around the election by not openly denouncing the illness. They know what the citizens are being subjected to in information war, and the Sputnik 5 V A scene is normal flu shot. I'm not a person, I don't take a flu shot, but if I was a Russian citizen and I needed to get on a plane and show on my passport that I had a booster, I would rather it be from a 1960s type of shot than some thing with adjuvants like mercury or whatever, or gene therapy, like that stuff. That the Pfizer thing and the AstraZeneca stuff is actually not what they're calling it. It's actually genetic mutation. It's something else. It's completely it's rewriting how the RNA operates at the cellular level, and it's causing like big problems for people. So
at the end of January, the beginning of February 2021, I actually experienced myself the illness we're talking about. And I have to say that apart from losing my smell and taste for 4 days, for 3-4 days, it didn't actually differ from a seasonal flu for me personally. That's my personal experience. Like the only difference is that I lost, like, although my nose was still breathing fine, but I lost smell and taste.
Yeah, I mean, I had something strange hit me in December 2019, as it was coming through Italy, and it's something. I mean, like, look, I'm not a doctor, and I know there's a lot of people that are pretending to be doctors on TV right now. And then there are doctors who are unconventional thinkers, which we need right now. and they're claiming that there's no such thing as a virus. That's fine. I think that it's a term. You can take it or leave it. It's a word. There are things, certainly, whether it's, whether the body's producing viruses as a way of, cleansing, there seems to be some communicable component of this, whether or not if you're allergic to the word virus or not is not that interesting to me. There's some communicable component to this thing, and maybe it's some kind of communicably shared immune response, that maybe what viruses is a natural, vaccine that is spreads among people. So we get a little bit sick because that's when you feel sick is actually your immune response, right? So I had something, and I had a little fever, which is strange. I hadn't had a fever of any kind, like maybe in 20 years, maybe 15 years. And all of a sudden, as this thing is spreading through this part of the world, I get something like this. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what it was, but like you said, it was just a flu. For me, it was a little bit like, for a day, I was on my ass. I had slept for one day, and then the fever broke in one day. But, but the things that they're trying to justify with this thing are insane.
Absolutely.
But the Great Reset agenda, they needed to have countries like Russia have puppet presidents, and they needed to be controlled by the IMF. And
thank God. Yeah, thank God we have jailed Navalny, because I think that Navalny was ultimately their candidate, but he's in jail right now.
I'm almost like, I know he's their candidate. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, he has no chance. Like, he doesn't have support of the public. Like,
absolutely.
Like it doesn't, like, people don't understand that having 10 or 20,000 protesters in a city like Moscow, which is the world's largest city, almost next to Mexico City. What do you have? 20, 30 million people in greater Moscow metropolitan area? Like the greater area? 25 million? Whatever.
The Moscow itself is like 15 million.
Yeah, but if you include areas that are like 50 kilometers around, that like it's the suburbs,
20, maybe 25 million people.
25 million people. Yeah. It's like one of the Mexico City, it's one of the world's largest cities, like up there with Mexico City. And to find 50,000 liberals that are going to show up on a day to hold signs doesn't mean shit. Yeah. But the media presents it like this is a huge opposition. It's like, no, there are tens and tens and tens of millions of people who support the present government, who went out, who they vote for it and stuff like that. I mean, they don't come out to protest because they're not against it, but you don't see them. Yeah. You see what I mean?
And trust me, I know some people who actually very critical of who are very critical of Putin, and who are very critical of our current government, but they are no fools. They understand. They see through Navalny's bullshit. They see who he is. They can see through his bullshit.
Right, of course.
They would never support him.
Being critical of Putin, I think, like, it's not for me to be, because I'm not a citizen of your country. I have like rules about things like that. But I respect, and I can see what some basis of criticism could be. Like, my mind works. I can see what some criticism could be. It's not my role to criticize another country's leader. However, in Russia, most people who are critical of Putin are more critical of Navalny, because it's very open. It's actually very publicly known that Navalny is an agent of George Soros. So that's not a secret, I mean, people who are critical of Putin that are intelligent tend to criticize that he's not either nationalistic enough.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Whereas Navalny is a total liberal.
Absolutely, so, although it's funny how that Navalny, at the beginning of his so-called political career, quote unquote, he actually tried to play Russian nationalist. He even attended the Russian marches, Ruski March. He attended them, and like he used to spout a lot of like nationalist, like Black Hundred type of rhetoric.
Yeah, he's just an actor. He's just an actor.
Do you know? I said Black Hundred. Do you know what Black Hundred is in Russia?
Of course.
So he used to spout
5 years ago.
He used to spout a lot of rhetoric of like nationalist type of rhetoric, and then suddenly he changed into pro-Western liberal.
Yeah.
He's an
Oh, that's
actor.
it. That's it. Just overnight too. He's an actor.
Overnight, yeah.
Yeah, but he doesn't. I don't think that the West really believes that he has chance to have power. I just think that
Mhm.
they use him as a media proxy, that Western media can cover it like as if there's some opposition movement that he leads. And like people that in my who follow me on my channels and stuff, like they
Yeah.
get wrong information. They're like, there was a guy saying, "Oh, but Navalny is like is Putin's biggest, political opponent." I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, there's a lot of like there like first of all,
That's laughable. I'm laughing.
yeah, there are people critical. There are people even in government that are,
Yeah.
technically or in fact opponents of Putin
Yeah.
that have millions of followers, not
Yeah.
not dozens of followers. I don't think that Navalny passed the 2% threshold in, you know, to the 2% census or 5%
Hmm.
threshold to even have basic support. So
Yeah, he was actually running for a, he was running for mayor in, yeah, yeah, I don't remember. It's maybe 2013 or 14. He ran for Moscow mayor, but he lost the election horribly. Of course, his supported blamed everything that they were like screaming that the elections were rigged, blah blah blah. But he lost horribly.
yes, it's awful. But yeah,
Yeah,
I mean but I think that if Russia avoids the agenda,
yeah,
then they will, Russia could solve its population problem. I think Russia could double its population with immigrants from the US. I mean, honestly, like I think millions of people are going to leave Europe and the
yeah,
US and Australia, and like as soon as they can. People don't there are like the people who believe in it, who want to drink the Kool-Aid will
yeah,
stay, but
yeah,
there are other ways to maintain power. Like I'm not being an idealist. I understand how power works, and I know that Russia has institutions and oligarchies and stuff, but there are other methods and theories that are like there's power and evil are two different things, and you can maintain power and you can preserve even some element of privilege that's relative to others, but the theories and ideas that this momentum has behind it in the West is very, very specific. It's a very, very specific and dystopic vision of humanity
yeah.
and the future. I'm not saying I think people are inherently good or that Russian oligarchs are good people or something like this. There's
Hmm.
actually, the point is that there's different ways of managing society. There's different ways of managing a class system. There's different
Yeah,
ways of even of arranging or thinking about a post-scarcity shift into the next, industrial revolution or whatever, which can maintain some degree of relative privilege for the privileged without disempowering or disenfranchising,
hmm,
hundreds of millions of people. There's just ways to do it. We could talk about that some other time, but
yeah,
the point is that what's happening is that it's almost like having failed to achieve its unipolar attempts, the U.S. has failed to achieve its unipolar hegemonic goals. Now it's imploding. Now what's left of its loyal assets
yeah,
and allies are devouring themselves. They're like they're trying to cannibalize the middle class and the lower classes, put people into sort of house arrest. Like it's basically a very bad, like you said, despotic situation, which
yeah,
certainly they failed in their attempts to build a global empire, and this is
hmm,
what happens. So
yeah,
they
yeah.
had hoped to
Okay.
maintain certain level of power, but they're also just very evil people.
Hmm.
So you have to,
Yeah. Okay. So we have already like recorded a lot of good stuff, good material. So I would like to ask you like this final question, and then we're going to wrap the video up unless you have something else
no,
to
I'm
add.
good. I'm
So
good.
my question is, so internet, Twitter, and Facebook. You see, you have Twitter mobs who cancel people who disagree with the mainstream. So do you think that cancel culture and internet censorship serves the purpose of the Great Reset.
It absolutely shows that the Great Reset will fail because when they push people off of platforms and people go onto other platforms, or people just get off the internet, which is even better in some ways. There are other methods of communication. It forces people like to become better informed about how to communicate and to become more intelligent, and they actually become more invested. They become more invested in their alternate forms of communication when they get off of these platforms, and they end up acquiring more knowledge, and they become more credible in the eyes of their peers. And people still, they are trying to remove people from in-person interactions, and they're going to shut down workplaces as they transition into this post-financial, post-capitalist order. So people aren't going to actually have jobs and go to work. But but cancel culture is a part of this. I mean, it's despotism. So obviously, if you don't have a right to speech, you don't have a right to ideas, right?
Yeah.
So it's but mobilizing a mob to do these things, you know, so that it looks like it's coming from people. Like your site was reported by community members. Instead of saying we don't approve of it, like they're taking this little cowardly approach, which has been used a lot in fascism and communism, to say that it was the people who were against it or something like that, you see. So
yeah. Okay, Joaquin. So I think it's time to wrap this up, because we have already recorded a good video. Like I like this. This was a great interview. Yeah. So yeah, it was a great pleasure. Yeah, it was a great pleasure having you on my channel. I hope to have you again. And people have, and it's no joke. You can check the comments under my latest 2 videos. People are requesting you back. When Joaquin? Please bring back Joaquin. Bring back.
Yeah, no, I'm honored. You know, I love your audience. I love doing these with you. I'm glad we were able to do it. We took a Sunday out to do it, and yeah,
great. Okay, don't worry, people. I'll have him again and again and again. Yeah. Okay, Joaquin. Bye-bye. Wish you all the best. Stay strong. Stay safe. Like, resist. Fight the power.
Yes.
Yeah. Bye, man. До свидания.